What's good, guys? Fantasy Joe back here with some more fantasy football content. Today I'm breaking down my running back rankings, my RB1s. We're going running back 1 through 12 today. Going to be talking why they're ranked where they are, breaking that down, all that good stuff. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Make sure you stick around. Hit a like button on this video. Helps us out a lot. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section down below. Let me know who should have made my top 12 rankings video, who I left out, who you think should be higher. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. But yeah, let's hop into this without further ado. We got our first running back up, Christian McCaffrey. No surprises here. That's because he's an absolute stud. Christian McCaffrey last year averaged over 24 touches per game, and he only played 3 games and had to leave 2 of those due to injury, but still averaging over 24 touches per game. He also averaged 27.3 fantasy points per game in 2020 in a half point per reception format. Really, there's not a whole lot to say about Christian McCaffrey. He is the best running back in fantasy. Again, very clearly, he scored 122.9 more fantasy points than the number 2 scoring running back in 2019. Just to remind you what he did the last time he was on a healthy pace, just how good he really was that season. So yeah, Christian McCaffrey, really, there's nothing to stop him from absolutely dominating fantasy football. Again, their offensive coordinator the other day said he expects him to have a very similar workload, even with the 17-game schedule. So expect Christian McCaffrey to dominate again this year. Moving on to number 2, we have Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook has been a top 5 back each of the last 2 seasons. There's only 3 running backs that have done that. And his 17-game pace last year for carries was 378, which is the same amount of carries Derrick Henry got last season when he ran for over 2,000 yards. Dalvin Cook missed 2 games last year. I think he still finishes the RB2. Really dominated. He's had 40 receptions each of the last 2 seasons. When you combine the workload that he gets on the ground as well as through the air, he really is the workhorse of that offense. They play through him. They gave him a contract extension. There's no reason to think he's not going to continue to get the ball at an incredible rate. He's a super talented player, has that home run threat ability constantly. And even last year, went down a little bit in the reception department, a little bit per reception as well, so the efficiency go down. There's a potential bounce back for that. Maybe he catches a few more passes. Maybe he does a little bit more with those passes as well. So Dalvin Cook could certainly do a lot this season in fantasy. He also had double-digit rushing touchdowns, I believe, each of the last 2 seasons. So once they get down to the red zone, they're not afraid to hand it to him. That's another reason why he comes in at number 2 this year on my running back rankings. So number 3, this might be a surprise, Derrick Henry. The reason I've got him so high is just because I think he is so safe. Carries by season, 2019, he had 303 carries. Then we look at 2020, that's last season. 378 carries. The Tennessee Titans are not afraid to hand Derrick Henry the football. We know that. We've seen that. They have a really good offensive line that is going to be better this year. They're missing their left tackle, Taylor Lewan, last season. Extremely talented football player. Funny guy. Shout out Bussin' with the boys. His rushing touchdowns by season in 2019, he had 16 rushing touchdowns, and in 2020, he had 17. In 2019, he also pulled in 2 receiving touchdowns as well. So when you're talking about Derrick Henry, you got to talk about, the pass catching work, because that's obviously the one area where he lacks that a lot of these other running backs really are heavily utilized in. But when you have rushing touchdowns like those and carries like that, he's just used so much in the rushing game and is so efficient in it. I think you have to draft Derrick Henry at over 2,000 rushing yards last year, 1,500 the year before, so led the league in rushing 2 consecutive seasons. I just think you draft Derrick Henry and he stays healthy for every game, you got a good chance you have a 1,500-yard rusher, double-digit touchdowns. And I think that's, towards the baseline of his projection as long as he stays healthy. That offense stays healthy, all that good stuff happens, obviously. But we're moving on to running back number 4. I've got Alvin Kamara. Kamara's here. He's averaged at least 5 yards per carry throughout his entire NFL career. He's also had at least 81 receptions every season of his NFL career, and the New Orleans Saints have a great offensive line across the board. They have a lot of talented players, really no holes on the offensive line. Everybody's pretty talented. But yeah, I'm not really worried about Alvin Kamara this year. I know some people are worried about the changeover at quarterback. I certainly think he'll be targeted maybe a little bit less every one of those 81 reception years obviously happened when Drew Brees was playing. That is a point of concern. But I think even if it's Jameis Winston, even if it's Taysom Hill, whoever is playing quarterback, Sean Payton is going to dial up some passes to Alvin Kamara every game. I think he's going to get his. Even if his totals come down a little bit, I think he'll increase maybe his rushing yardage because they'll lean a little bit more on that run game and they need his explosiveness in that area. Or, his efficiency could even go up in the passing game, honestly. He's just such a talented player, such a good offensive line, and as a talented play caller, I just think things are going to work out for Alvin Kamara. And he's been so good for fantasy. That's why I think he's still the 4th best running back this season without Drew Brees. Moving on to number 5, you guys can check out the video I just did about the bounce back players on the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to link that above, and how talented I think this offense is going to be this season. They obviously, Dak is going to get the return of Dak Prescott and 3 all-pro offensive linemen that he was missing for a majority of last year. And Leo Collins, their right tackle, right guard Zach Martin, and left tackle, his name is slipping my mind right now, Tyron Smith. They're getting back a ton of really good offensive linemen. That's going to help him out a ton. Ezekiel Elliott, last year only averaged 4 yards a carry, lowest of his career. I think you get those linemen back, he's going to be a beast again in fantasy because he gets a ton of volume. Got that big, massive contract, gets a ton of the rushing work, was getting a ton of receiving work before Dak Prescott went down, especially. Averaging 19.9.5 points, fantasy points per game, and a half point per reception league last year when Dak Prescott was playing. I think he can get back to that point or close to it. Maybe not 19.9, but I think he can be very good for fantasy this year with Dak back. And that defense is still bad. I think they're going to have to, keep pushing the pace on offense. And even if they're down, Zeke is going to be catching passes. Zeke is going to be getting those inside the 5, inside the 10 carries that he got so many of last year and wasn't able to turn into touchdowns. I think he had 32 carries inside the 10 and only turned that into 5 touchdowns. Any other running back close to that had at least 9. So I think there's a big bounce back coming for Zeke in touchdowns and efficiency. That's why I have him as a top 5 running back. He gets a ton of the running ball of the run, a ton of the carries, and he's heavily utilized in the passing game. He's used in both those areas. That's why he's a top 5 back for me. Number 6, this might be a surprise for people having Zeke a little higher than Saquon. We look at Saquon, he is a supremely talented running back. There's no denying that. The kid's an absolute stud, but he does have a horrible offensive line. He has Daniel Jones at quarterback. I have really little faith in Daniel Jones at this point. I think he could be solid. They've added Kenny Galladay and Kadarius Toney to that receiving core, try to help him out. I'm not saying he can't take a big step forward. I'm just saying I'm not necessarily counting on him taking a huge step forward. He might just not be the guy. That's what worries me, is if Daniel Jones isn't the guy. He fumbled more than anybody in football last year. That gives away a lot of possessions. They had a bad offensive line. Second worst ranked offensive line according to Pro Football Focus last year. And Saquon Barkley has missed most of the last 2 seasons due to injury. If he stays healthy, there's no reason he won't dominate for fantasy. But at this point, you have to wonder if he is going to stay healthy. And you have to question a lot of the players on this offense. So that's why he weighs in at number 6 for me. But still, number 6 running back, we're picking hairs here. I just think when I have to decide between him or Zeke, I'm going to go with Zeke because they have a much better offense. And their offensive line is much improved. Pieces around him are a lot better. But I think Saquon is probably a more talented running back than Zeke at this point in their career. But that's the reason why they're 5-6. Next up, we got Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor was RB6 as a rookie. The Indianapolis Colts have a great offensive line, starting Quentin Nelson at that left guard spot. They had to replace Anthony Castano at left tackle, but they were able to do that with Eric Fisher, who should be healthy fairly soon, I think. Not a whole lot of word on his timeline for recovery. Maybe he'll miss some weeks, but a solid replacement there whenever he's healthy regardless. Some other talented players in the offensive line, Ryan Kelly at center. So I think he will be very good on the ground. What I worry about is Phillip Rivers checks down the running backs a ton. Going to Carson Wentz, he certainly checks down a lot less than Phillip Rivers because he has more options, can throw the ball downfield, scramble, do other things. So if Jonathan Taylor isn't going to be the third down back on this offense, Nyheim Hines is definitely going to be. So that lack of pass catching work is what worries me. That's why he's at the 7 spot. If he was going to get that pass catching volume, I think I'd have him up higher than Zeke. If he was going to get the same pass catching work as Zeke, but he's not. So I see them as pretty similar situations, except Ezekiel Elliott will be utilized more heavily on third down, to be honest with you, and that's why I've got him higher. Doesn't mean I don't like Jonathan Taylor. Still have him as my 7th-rated running back. I think he's going to have a fantastic season. Number 8, we got Nick Chubb. Similar situation to Jonathan Taylor, just not really utilized in that passing game very much, but it's a great offensive line. It's heavily utilized in the running game as a very talented runner. Had 12 touchdowns in 12 games last year. But as I said, he's not utilized much in that passing game because of Kareem Hunt, and that's what worries me. That's why he's down at 8. Sure, he could rush for 1,500 yards this year and run for 15 touchdowns. Do have a Derrick Henry similar season. But with Kareem Hunt being there, stealing some of that work, stealing some of that red zone work, it definitely worries me. It pushes him down a little bit when he's not getting that pass catching volume as well to help even out those bad rushing weeks, the weeks he doesn't happen to punch in a touchdown or bust a long run. So that's why I got Nick Chubb at 8. But yeah, it was a really, really talented running back, over 1,000 yards last year in only 12 games. Certainly wouldn't be mad if I drafted him in my league. At number 9, we've got Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has been top 5 back each of the last 2 seasons. Only him, Aaron Jones, and Dalvin Cook have done that. He could see an increase in pass catching volume this year, and the reason being that I think is Jamal Williams, who played a ton on third down, has left the team. He had pass catching ability as well. He was also a great pass blocker. So now I think instead of A.J. Dillon picking up those third down roles, I think Aaron Jones is going to pick up more of those, maybe increase those pass catching numbers, those 60 or 70 reception numbers. Add to his already getting over 200 carries usually each year in the running game. For a great offensive line in Green Bay, I could see him punching in a lot of touchdowns if Aaron Rodgers is back. And if he's not, I still think he's going to get a lot of volume, a lot of checkdowns. And with that good offensive line, I think he could still be fantasy relevant for sure. If I knew Aaron Rodgers was going to play, I think I'd definitely have him a lot higher. We don't know that. And at this point, it's looking like he probably won't unless he gets a new contract. So I push Aaron Jones a little bit down in my rankings because of the Aaron Rodgers situation. Next up, we've got Cam Akers. He has incredible potential if he is the workhorse, if he can secure that Todd Gurley role. He could be absolutely dynamic for fantasy. We saw what Todd Gurley was able to do in that role. And obviously, Todd Gurley was extremely talented during that time. But really, the biggest thing was the just incredible amount of volume he was getting in both the rushing and the passing game, and how heavily he was utilized in the red zone. So if we could see Cam Akers be utilized in a similar way to Todd Gurley, the sky's the limit for fantasy. That's why I have him at number 10. He's a guy who has that top 5 back potential. You could potentially get in the second round, something like that. And over the last 6 games of last season, he averaged 22 carries per game. That's why he's so high. We saw him at the end of that year be utilized in that role. Everyone's thinking maybe this is the year he gets utilized, given that Todd Gurley role. His second year in the league after being a second-round draft pick out of Florida State last season. But they still have Darrell Henderson on the roster, who was a high draft pick the year before in the 3rd round for Memphis. So maybe they move him in. That would be the downer for Cam Akers. But, yeah, he's this high because of what he could potentially be. Moving on, number 11, we have Austin Ekeler. Ekeler is a greatly improved offensive line from last year. The Chargers had the last ranked offensive line according to Pro Football Focus last season. And they added Corey Linsley, who was the number 1 ranked center from that Green Bay Packers offense. They added him. Centers help out a ton in the running game, so hopefully he'll help out a lot. And with the number 13th pick, they took Rashawn Slater to play left tackle. He'll be in great improvement from their left tackle last season, who was pretty bad. And if we look at his 17-game pace from last year, don't even take out his injury games. Include the games that he left injured, because I think the first time he went down, he left in the first quarter. So just putting that out there, missed basically that whole game, but still had a 17-game pace from last year of over 288 touches. Not everything's gonna be perfect, guys. Sorry about that. But yeah, he had a pace of over 288 touches last year. I think the potential with Justin Herbert for this to be a ridiculously good offense is there. I don't think people really talk about it because they just Herbert already outdid their expectations last year. But let's look at what Herbert has done so far. He's thrown 31 touchdowns, ran in 5 touchdowns as well, I believe. Basically, by far the best rookie season of any quarterback we've ever seen, and he did that with the worst rated offensive line in football last year. We've improved his offensive line. Hopefully, we give him a healthy Austin Ekeler this entire season, which he didn't have last year. Gets Keenan Allen, gets a full offseason being the guy with Mike Williams coming back. I think there's a lot that could happen with this offense potentially. So that's why I'm so high on Austin Ekeler. I think he's going to be the lead back on that team and could catch close to 90 passes with the volume and the way he is utilized. So could be very good. And in PPR leagues, I definitely give him an even higher bump. Number 12, we've got Antonio Gibson, who is very good as a rookie. I think the big reason I've got him so high is I think their offense should improve greatly this year. The addition of Ryan Fitzpatrick. They also added Curtis Samuel in free agency. I think both of those are upgrades in their team. I think he's going to get an uptick in pass catching work as well. Last year we had that the offseason was obviously mainly online. It's hard to run routes and out of the backfield online. I think that with the full offseason, Antonio Gibson is really going to get worked into the offense more and is going to, as he's worked into the offense, learns those routes, it's going to be more work on third down. If he starts getting that pass catching volume, he's a dynamic receiver. We could really see him just take off if he could get that 50 or 60 reception mark. Or if he even just gets a slight uptick in the reception work, I think he could really be dangerous. Fitzpatrick also throws those running backs. I think there's a narrative out there that he doesn't. I would disagree with that narrative. In the 6 games Gaskin played with Ryan Fitzpatrick last year, he averaged 4.5 receptions per game. I think Antonio Gibson can slide right into that range and just be very good for fantasy if he gets that amount of receptions with the rushing down volume we saw him get last year as well. I think the Washington football team has an underrated offensive line too. They were 6th rated offensive line last year, according to Pro Football Focus. I really think they've got some good players on that team. Brandon Scherf being one of them, a talented guard who really opens things up in the running game. I think Gibson's going to continue to produce for fantasy, even though he had 11 rushing touchdowns last year. That might come down a little bit. His efficiency might move down the touchdown department. I think his volume will make up for that. The uptick in volume in both rushing and pass catching will make up for the touchdown efficiency he showed last year. But still, I like to draft players with touchdown efficiency. I don't think that's a bad thing. Guys have a nose for the end zone and have shown it throughout their NFL careers. It's not a bad thing. So yeah, really high Antonio Gibson this season. Think he could be dynamic for fantasy. If you guys have made it to this point in the video, please hit that like button, subscribe to stick around, and let me know who you think should have made this list down below in the questions and comments. I'll respond as always. Fantasy Joe, peace out. Thank you guys so much for sticking around.